couple months back, I was watching the Summer Games Fest excitedly wondering what new games the future would have in store. They showed off games like Black Myth Wukong, which we all know is a certified heater, Space Marine 2, Metaphor, Sparking Zero, and in the midst of all of this madness, there was also a trailer that for some reason or another stuck with me. The trailer for a little game called Slitterhead, which was so unique and insane that I couldn't tell what the heck I was even looking at the entire time I played it. There was possession, combat, a giant scary mantis thing, and some genuinely creepy body horror, which made me kind of excited. It was also directed by Keiichiro Toyama, who made the Silent Hill franchise, so surely we had an instant classic on the way. Then, a few weeks passed and I never heard of this game again. Thinking that it got delayed, or possibly cancelled, I decided to give it a search on Steam, and to my surprise, the game was already out. And this made me more confused than the trailer. How did the creator of Silent Hill drop a new horror game without anybody making so much as a stir? How did a game featured in the Summer Game Fest have such a stealthy release? And most importantly of all, what the hell is a Slitterhead? It feels like a slur. Instead of being basic and boring, using the services of the World Wide Web to figure out what happened, I figured that it would be more fun to dive into this game head on and find out exactly what the problem was. And even though we played a lot of very strange games on this channel, even I wasn't ready for the weird, awkward, and incredibly frustrating world of The best way to describe Slitterhead is that this is a good game for the PlayStation 2. If this game was released in the same year as like Shadow the Hedgehog, or Lego Star Wars, or even the Spy Toy, I would give it a high 8 out of 10. But that was nearly 20 years ago. Getting this game in the same year as Helldivers 2 and Black Myth Wukong really feels like spending the $50 makes me the Slitterhead? It works, right? It sounds like an insult. And in order for you to have the same experience that I did, I am going to tell you about the first few missions before doing the big reveal. The game starts with a cutscene of some cop finding a body in the trash, and his brain was sucked out. Whoa, creepy! We hear the protagonist having an internal monologue about amnesia, and fair warning, the lore of this game is incredibly confusing, so I'm going to explain something very quickly right now so that we don't get lost later. The protagonist in this game has many names. He's not a person, he is an entity known as the Spirit, the Hyokai, or the Night Owl. He's basically a consciousness with no physical body that can dive into the minds of anything and take control. Well, okay, not anything, but we'll get to that in a second. Controlling things and jumping around is the main mechanic in this game, and it basically defines every single second of your playthrough. We possess a dog and use his sense of smell to trace a scent. It's basically a pretty generic and hand-holdy tutorial which tells me what to do. We follow a path and jump into random people to chase the trail until we get hit by another cutscene. It's some lady of the night who turns into a Slitterhead demon and starts trying to kill us. She actually succeeds, but in this game when your host dies, you don't. You can still jump into someone else. However, you can only experience 3 deaths until you lose, so you have to make sure to at least leave the human behind when you know they're gonna die. I always found this mechanic of the game pretty funny, that you're just kind of taking someone's body over and then the second they're about to die, you jump out. Woo! Victimless crime! I'm not there for when they die! Like, can you imagine talking to your girlfriend outside and the next second you're staring at a train blasting you at 400 miles per hour? It's so fucked up. We run away for a little longer and then get hit by another cutscene of a dude on a motorcycle and his friend just riding around at night. Then the cutscene randomly ends and puts us somewhere else. I'm okay with non-linear storytelling, that's fine. But who were they? We do another tutorial section as Night Owl, which is just walking and clicking on stuff for another 4 minutes. Then we finally get into our first action segment of the game 14 minutes in. The combat in this game is very unique, and actually brings something pretty fun and interesting to the table. You lock onto enemies with the left trigger and you block their attacks or parry them. You can parry attacks by flicking the right analog stick in the direction that the attacks are coming from. You have a basic attack combo which is pretty limited, but the part that makes this game so unique is the possession gimmick. When you possess someone for a limited time, they get a big shield and bonus stats. So you're rewarded for hitting an enemy, possessing someone else, and hitting them again. You're basically jumping someone as one person, which is kind of hilarious. There are a few jank issues with it fresh off the bat though. First off, you can only lock onto one enemy at a time, which is obvious. Parrying, a very important mechanic, is only possible against the enemy that you're locked onto. But get this, you can't switch which enemy you lock onto because the right analog stick is how you parry attacks. So you just kind of have to spam the lock-on button until you get the right guy. At this point though, I was a fan of the game because hey, we're just getting started. And also at this point, I didn't know the big reveal. We continue our very generic point-and-click tutorial segment, and we find out that Night Owl's only goal is to destroy Slitterheads, aka those giant creepy monsters that we just saw. Then we get hit with this cutscene, and just watch it. So this is a really weird thing that I forgot to mention, but Slitterhead has the most random voice acting I've ever seen. Sometimes there's voice acting.
You're going out again?
Sometimes there isn't. Sometimes there is, but the words being said aren't related to what's being said on screen. Sometimes there's even voice acted cutscenes where certain lines just aren't voice acted. I've gone through the footage for myself, and there seems to be no rhyme or reason for it. It's just completely random. We do yet another hand-holdy tutorial section, and now we have to save some random girl in a red jacket who's about to be brutalized by a Slitterhead. Being the hero that I am, I savagely beat the husk of this man to death, using the body of possibly a middle-aged mother in order to save the prettier character. Because morals.
Great job.
Then we get hit by a pretty good cutscene, where the monster transforms into a gigantic praying mantis? What the f? That's awesome! Pretty character gets impaled and Night Owl decides to jump into her body to see if he could save her from her injuries. And then she goes Super Saiyan? This is our first rarity of the game, Julie. Basically, rarities are people who for some reason synergize with the Night Owl really well. They're much stronger, come with their own sets of abilities, and also serve as a supporting cast of the game. Once you have them unlocked, you can choose to start missions with up to 2 of them. Julie, for example, had something called Sonic Claws, which is a ranged attack dealing decent damage, and a move called Revive All, which healed her and everyone else near her. Rarities are also conscious when they get possessed and end up taking a backseat, kind of like the sunken place in the movie Get Out, whereas most normal people lose their memories and just wake up dead. We fight a boss monster using Julie, and at this point, I was pretty excited to see what else this game was going to have in store. This weird praying mantis monster looked really cool, and knowing that we were again just in the beginning of the game, I was so stoked to see what other designs the game would come up with. Maybe we'll fight a bear. Maybe we'll fight an iguana. The possibilities are quite literally endless. We beat up the Slitterhead and And I don't think I'm ever gonna get used to saying that word. Then a random dude with a shotgun shows up and helps us get our final blow. Julie sees a vision of the world burning and spots 3 monstrous plague beasts. Oh shit. Then she catches on fire and wakes up back in her apartment. Whoa, spooky. We get a not cutscene where Julie explains her visions to the Night Owl. And I call it that because this cutscene is just facial expressions and random animations floating on like the PNG of a background. It looks really bad. Hopefully, we don't see it too often. I mean, it would be pretty stupid if the game used these kinds of cutscenes to tell you just about everything in the story, right? We get a cutscene of 2 people breaking TOS. What? And then one of them turns into a slitterhead and kills the other. Don't make me skip the cutscene. Oh! Then we get a quest where we have to investigate the scene of the attack, and it's still a tutorial. It's only been an hour of gameplay though, and Japanese titles have notoriously long tutorials, so I guess I'll let it slide for now. I try to interrogate a sex worker in order to get information, and then we bang? Like, for no reason, the Night Owl just goes with it? It adds nothing to the story? But I'll admit, it's kind of hilarious. We find the body of yet another victim, and now we have the scent to track down the enemy of this mission. You can do this sight jack thing, which shows you what the enemy is looking at, but it's completely useless because the game just leads you to them anyway. I think they had a cool idea here, but it's just not anything. Like, who the f cares what they're looking at if it ain't my hands? Finally, we find our target and make them break their disguise by throwing our blood on them because Hyokai blood is apparently poisonous? I guess. We break into a chase scene where the slitterhead tries to run away from us, and we have to chase it down and attack it. And honestly, I absolutely hate this part of the game. Imagine having to chase an enemy down with Souls-like combat. The slitterhead also does an instant knockdown attack when you get too close, and throws boxes in front of you as it runs away. You basically feel like the stupid, dumb bad guys that the good guys always get away from in action movies. Like, just straight up stooge gameplay, man. Eventually, we catch up to this slitterhead and it becomes a praying mantis. Again, we get another cutscene where Julie runs away from Motorcycle Man, and then we beat the mission. There's another not cutscene where you just get exposition dumped, and then we have to search for some girl named Anita. We jump into the next mission, which is an infiltration mission where we break into a brothel by possessing random people, and then by talking to random NPCs that have yellow dots over their head. We're nearly 90 minutes into the game, and I guess we're still in the tutorial section. Also, at this point, I'm starting to notice something here. Are you the manager here? Huh? Do I look like a manager? The madame went to the terrace up the stairs over there. The translation in this game is pretty bad, and not in the sense that there's grammatical errors. It all technically still makes sense, but it's very clearly either AI translated or translated by someone who doesn't speak too much English. Again, the dialogue does follow the laws of the language, but you can definitely tell that it's not all the way there. This entire mission is basically clicking on an item, possessing someone else, and then clicking on an item. We finally see Anita, and I need a number cause she bad as hell. We run outside and get attacked by a slitterhead, and this fight takes about 2 minutes. We find out there's a slitterhead behind the scenes of this brothel and continue to climb upwards, then fight another slitterhead for about a minute. The reason why I keep bringing up the time it took to fight these guys is because the last 35 minutes of gameplay, we've only gotten to fight for about 2.5 minutes total. I understand that games can have a slow start, but the fact that the other 33-ish minutes are literally just talking to people and getting exposition dumped in the most boring, badly translated, and not voice-acted way possible, it was all starting to become a bit grating. You may also notice that I'm talking less and less about the story itself, and that's because it's genuinely not good. We keep climbing the building and fight 2 enemies at the same time, and here's where I learned a pretty annoying mechanic. Your rarities, aka your OP characters that matter in the story, sometimes don't spawn into fights until later because they're catching up, forcing you to play generic awful normal people with no real combat ability. When they do spawn, you kind of just have to look for them, and they look exactly the same as everyone else. It's a small setback, but it's weird that they didn't outline the major characters, so in bigger fights you have to kinda scan around until you find the person you want. A Slitterhead transforms into an actual boss fight, and this time it's a praying mantis. Again, with him defeated, the mission ends in the cheesiest way possible. A to be continued screen. There's more not cutscenes, and when I say this, you're probably thinking, hey, that's fine, come on, it's probably only one of them. What if I told you that this time, it was 5 in a row? We do another mission where we're trying to break into a nightclub, but then we're hit with the most insane, absolutely unexpected turn of gameplay that I can't even fathom existing in a game like this. A stealth mission. Where you have to sneak around and get by guards, and they all have PlayStation 1 level AI where they just kinda face one direction for a bit, and then face the other. This was the moment that I realized that Slitterhead was an awful game. I think I get it. I think I understand why not a lot of people talked about this game. You may be wondering, hey, Scooch, if you could possess random people, why don't you just possess the guards patrolling the building and walk in? Since possessing them would mean that you just become one of them, right? You just can't. The game doesn't explain it. There's just some people you can't possess. Because why not? Another funny, incredibly lazy fact about these missions is that you crouch automatically and can't get out of the crouch the entire mission. Now, my dear viewer, Slitterhead is a 14-hour game. Up until this point, I've been narrating the start of the game because I wanted you, my dear viewer, to experience what I was experiencing in real time with me. But now is the time that we jump into the review of the game itself. Why did I wait until the stealth mission, you might ask? Because this is actually the exact point that you have seen everything this game has to offer. I am not joking. Nothing in this game ever gets more complicated than the stuff that you have seen up to this moment. Every boss fight is a praying mantis with the exact same attack pattern. There are super bosses that are praying mantises with like 2 or 3 bonus moves, but besides that, they're basically all exactly the same. Every single mission is either a shitty chase scene, a tutorial-ass walking simulator with minor fights placed in between, or the occasional big boss fight, which again is just like all the others. And around 98% of this game's cutscenes are exposition dumps with no voice acting and the character model posed in different ways floating in a background. You very, and I mean very rarely get a full-scale cutscene with actual voice acting in it. It's not an exaggeration, this game has about 5 minutes of voice-acted dialogue. And out of the entire 14-hour runtime, I'd say about 2 hours was dedicated to actually fighting anything. And in those 2 hours, there was very little to no variation. In fact, I found out about halfway through the game that most boss fights can be won by just spamming the power attack button over and over, because the enemy gets hit stunned so long that you can just loop it. Now, I want to take a step back for a bit and talk about the story itself because it misses the mark in just about every single way. Basically, the entire game revolves around Night Owl and his rarities. There are about 8 rarities in total, and only 2 of them actually matter, which is the motorcycle guy, which we saw earlier. His name is Alex, and his entire character seems to be written by a 5-year-old. He's a badass guy who rides around on a motorcycle. He doesn't have much to say. He has a bunch of tattoos and carries a shotgun. Also, he's a doctor. because why not? And of course, Julie, the first rarity that you find who has a heart of gold and wants to save the world from those evil Slitterheads. Well, except for the 80 or so people she lets you possess and kill in the middle of all the fights. Now let's talk about something important that I'm sure you've been expecting me to mention for the entire runtime of this video: time travel. Throughout the course of the game, you're repeating the same 3 days over and over in order to change the events that occur and stop the end of the world that we saw in that vision. Before you cheer too loudly or give this game credit for doing something creative, this is basically the developers finding a way to use the same maps over and over without actually adding content to the game. Sure, there's new cutscenes that happen on repeated days, but the cutscenes are all exposition with no actual substance. Throughout the course of this convoluted yet somehow incredibly empty story, there are 6 other characters that you end up finding, but not a single one of them matters at all. They don't add to the story, they're not part of the main plot, and to further bat the point home about this game being lazy, a lot of them have the exact same attack combos as each other as well. You also can't progress the story until you get all of them. Sure, all of these characters might have different abilities, but a lot of them are just ranged attack or small buff. Narratively, they're also as one-dimensional as physically possible. Like try this house cleaner character that you find, who is basically a stereotype-ridden caricature of a foreign cleaning lady. I'm not joking, it's pretty bad. But the biggest problem with these other rarities is that finding them is a monumental pain in the ass. You have to replay missions that you've already done before. Watch the shitty cutscenes that you've already watched, a lot of which you can't skip. Then you have to trigger some random side event by doing a very specific task that would be incredibly difficult to find out without Googling it. When I say very specific, I mean very specific. Like choosing a certain character to click on a random door in order to trigger an event to make you open a different path in the mission. For example, to unlock the character Try, you have to eavesdrop on a conversation that is off the path you normally walk in a stealth mission. Then, 20 or so minutes into this sneaking mission that you've already played before, by the way, you have to find a random tiny window and climb through it in possession mode in order to find her. But get this, if you didn't eavesdrop on the conversation initially, the window just doesn't open? I think I f***ed it, chat. I think we gotta start the mission over. Meaning, you'll have to play the same 20-minute sneak mission again from the beginning. I know I said it already, but you have to unlock all of these characters in order to beat the game. So if you think that you could skip replaying the boring missions, you can't. There's also these collectible little memories that you find randomly dispersed throughout, and you need to collect most of those in order to beat the game as well, so good luck doing that. There's an old lady rarity you have to unlock by finding her in 6 different missions and talking to her every single time that you see her. But funny enough, since this game has no free roam, and since all of these missions already have specific goals in them, you can find her and literally not be able to talk to her until you get through enough of the mission that you've already played. There's this special unit cop rarity that you get towards the end of the game, and you could tell that the developers just stopped giving a shit at this point because you don't have to find him at all. Just one day he's in your party, and his first not cutscene is just him giving you a lore dump for absolutely no reason. The devs really went, fuck it, throw him in. Now, I'm gonna try my best to finish explaining the story of this game, but please understand that the writers clearly didn't know what they were doing either, so it's gonna get very confusing. You find a cult called the Echoes of Love, where half the people attending are Slitterheads and half of them are humans. Slitterheads eat the brains of humans, but also end up absorbing the humans' feelings as well, meaning a lot of them end up just wanting to live human lives and find human love. There are 2 leaders to this cult, Yin Yue, this white-haired martial artist who's notably a great human that can can also somehow detect the Night Owl, and the Shadow Leader you don't see until later because he's a really mysterious figure. Eventually, there's a reveal that the cult is actually sacrificing its human members so that the Slitterheads can sustain themselves on the brains. Then you go to confront Lord Yinyue and find out that the Shadow Leader he's been talking to is dead and has been for a while. Yinyue loses his mind because he's secretly doing really messed up evil stuff without any recollection of it. There turns out to be another super Slitterhead out there with the same time travel abilities that you have, except this one is super evil. Just fucking go with it. You get into a massive fight with the Super Slitter and you end up killing him and Yinyue to boot, but he sees Alex, aka Motorcycle Guy's face as he dies. Since the Super Slitter has the same time travel abilities that Night Owl does, he goes back in time and starts to mess things up so that the Night Owl can't kill him. You find out that Alex's family was killed by Slitterheads when he was a kid, which is why he hates them so much. And it kind of doesn't make sense because they were supposed to have just spawned, but I guess not anymore. The Super Slitter remembered Alex's face and in turn tracks down Lisa, the only person Alex has left in his life, and possesses her, making a boss fight where you have to kill Lisa. This sounds really sad and badass when I talk about it, but it falls short when you realize that the only thing that Lisa has done all game is show up in the not cutscene smoking like a goddamn chimney and nagging about your attitude. She also has comically large feet. Yo girl, Kingdom Hearts is that way. You go further back in time to stop the Super Slitter from killing Lisa, but no matter how far back you go, which caps out at 3 days for some reason, Lisa is already dead before you can save her. Alex loses his mind and sticks himself in a self-hating destructive time loop where he rewinds time for 3 days to kill Lisa again and again in order to make that one Slitterhead suffer. And now that Alex is crazy, he doesn't want the Night Owl to falter, so he goes even crazier and kills every single other rarity in the game so that the Night Owl's consciousness isn't influenced. The Night Owl is eventually consumed by Alex's rage. Meanwhile, Julie gets possessed by Leopardhead, another Hyokai. I said this was gonna be ass. Leopardhead Julie decides she wants to step in and stop everything. Again, I'm gonna take a quick breather here to say that you're not allowed to progress in the game unless you find these random yellow dots in the city. So if you don't find them, all of these missions lock themselves until you backtrack and watch those cutscenes again and do the searching. So have fun. You have a boss fight against Julie and she ends up being killed. And then you unlock dimensional travel into the Omegaverse, where Leopardhead is now controlling Alex instead. I'm telling you, man. It is revealed that the Night Owl and Leopardhead are alternate versions of each other, and the two Hyokai, Leopardhead and Night Owl, alongside the Slitterheads, are all time travelers from an apocalyptic future where the travel process went wrong, resulting in the majority of travelers turning into the parasitic race of Slitterheads. Night Owl is the only one that successfully traveled back, and Leopardhead too, I guess because they're alternate versions of each other. The Night Owl remembers that he brought back a device that is a mystic seal, just in case he encountered an evil he couldn't beat, and then he retrieves the seal, returns to the original timeline where Alex has killed all the other rarities again besides Julie. Night Owl seals away the Super Slitter, but Alex has Leopardhead crash a plane into the city because now he's a terrorist. Night Owl rewinds time one last time and then possesses a person on the plane to stop the plane crash, and Alex, the motorcycle guy's body, disappears. The post-credits scene shows a possessed Alex driving off with a message that basically says, "To be continued." My response, I fucking think not. Slitterhead is the worst game I played in 2024. The biggest shame behind this game is that the idea is kind of not bad when you try it for the first time, but the combat gets repetitive fast. stun locking enemies with the same button mashed combo again and again to save yourself the energy of thinking. Enemies can randomly apply debuffs to you, and one of them is to slow down your movement and disable dodge rolls. And it's funny because they didn't want to give you a separate animation for being slowed or withered, so they literally just make your character move in slow motion. It's even funnier when you play one of the most important missions of the game, and in this mission you walk through a hallway where a Slitterhead torments you, but the team was so lazy and didn't want to find a way to lock your animation to walking that they instead put the slow debuff on you, and you can fucking see it on your debuff bar. Which, this may actually win my award for the laziest thing I saw all year. The possession gimmick is fun at first, but it quickly becomes stale because they never actually do anything with it. And these complaints that I have are all about the good parts of the game, which is only about 5% of it. The other 95% felt like a never-ending tutorial where they didn't think your brain cells ever actually developed, so they dragged you through every not voice-acted line saying shit like, "I should check the stairs," before pointing the camera at the stairs, so big dumb caveman go stare. It may sound like I'm being harsh, and that's because I am. You know how I keep saying that there's no voice acting? Well, there is. Your character randomly says things in English the whole time, and none of it has to do with the situation at hand. I've played some pretty bad games on this channel. In fact, I actually really like bad games. But Slitterhead is something that is so much more sinister. It is a bad game trying to disguise itself as a good game. The trailer they showed with that beautiful cutscene showed one of the only cutscenes in the game to reach that caliber. They snuck it in between masterpieces like Black Myth Wukong to clickbait idiots into thinking that this game was worth the $50 price tag. And judging by how they treat the player the entire game, idiots are exactly the kind of person that would play this. Wait. I'm gonna have to give Slitterhead a 3 out of 10. I'll give it a 3. And the only reason it's not a 2 is because I personally found Lisa's big feet to be hilarious. What the hell am I looking at, man? Thank you so much for watching. I have a second channel where I do much more freeform movie reviews and stuff like that, so be sure to check that out. And here's a playlist of content that you might like. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. I think that's all I gotta say. My feet hurt. I've been standing for a really long time, so I'm gonna get out of here. Adios!